There's a particular kind of invisible you become when you've given everything for so long that people forget you ever had anything to give in the first place. I'm sitting on the porch of a small beach cottage right now, watching the sun paint the ocean in shades of amber and rose. The salt air fills my lungs in a way that feels like breathing for the first time in years. My hands, these worn, capable hands that have worked 2 jobs, raised a son alone, and signed away nearly everything I owned, are wrapped around a mug of coffee. Not the cheap stuff I'd been buying for the last decade. The good kind. $8 a bag instead of $4. You might think that's a small thing, but when you've spent 10 years choosing the cheaper option so you could send money to your grown son, when you've watched your bank account dwindle to 3 digits while theirs grew to 6, when you've become so accustomed to putting yourself last that you've forgotten you were ever first, that $8 coffee becomes a declaration of independence. My name is Dorothy Williams. I'm 64 years old. And 6 months ago, I did something that my son says was unforgivable. I sold the house he was living in, the house that was in my name that I'd paid for, while he and his wife were on a Caribbean cruise. A cruise I'd helped fund with the last payment I'd made on their mortgage. They called me vindictive, cruel, selfish, said I destroyed their lives out of spite. But here's what they don't tell you about disappearing in plain sight. By the time you wake up and realize you're gone, the people around you have already rearranged the furniture. They've gotten comfortable with your absence. They've built their lives around the empty space where you used to stand, and when you try to reclaim that space, when you try to become visible again, they call it an attack. This isn't a story about revenge. It's not even really a story about a house. It's a story about how a woman can give everything, her time, her money, her very self, and still be told she's not family. About how love without respect isn't love at all. It's just another kind of using. And it's about how sometimes the most radical thing you can do is choose yourself. Let me tell you how a woman disappears in plain sight and how she finds her way back. 1995. When I was still Dorothy, I need you to understand what I had before I can show you what I lost. Back in 1995, I was 38 years old and my world smelled like roses. Not the store-bought kind that don't have any scent. Real roses, old garden varieties with names like Madame Hardy and Souvenir de la Malmaison. I had 17 different types growing in the garden behind my house. 17. I knew each one by name, by the curve of its petals, by the particular way it opened in the morning sun. I'd spend Saturday mornings out there with my gloves and my pruning shears, dirt under my fingernails, the Georgia heat making my cotton dress stick to my back. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, would lean over the fence and say, "Dorothy Williams, you got the best roses in 3 counties." And I'd smile because it was true, and because tending those roses was the closest thing I had to prayer outside of church. My kitchen in those days always smelled like something baking. Peach cobbler mostly. I made it every Sunday after church, using my grandmother's recipe from a notebook so old the pages were the color of tea. The handwriting was fading, but I knew the measurements by heart. 1.5 cups of sugar, 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, butter cut into the flour until it looked like coarse meal. People would close their eyes when they took the first bite. Actually close their eyes. That's how you know you've made something worth making. I had a voice back then, too. Not just for talking, but for singing. I sang alto in the choir at First Baptist, and when we hit the harmony on "His Eye is on the Sparrow," the Reverend would pause his Bible reading just to listen. My voice could fill that church, could make the stained glass windows seem to glow brighter. Sister Margaret used to say I sang like I was having a conversation with God, and maybe I was. There was a chair in my living room, a reading chair, upholstered in this deep blue fabric that reminded me of the ocean I'd never seen. I'd bought it at an estate sale for $40, reupholstered it myself. That chair sat by the window where the afternoon light came in just right, and that's where I'd sit every evening after work, reading Toni Morrison and Maya Angelou, letting their words wash over me like that same light. I had a life. Not a big life, not a fancy life, but it was mine. I knew who I was. I was Dorothy Marie Williams, daughter of James and Ruth, widow of Gerald, mother of Terrence. I was a woman who grew roses and baked cobblers and sang in church and read poetry in the slanted afternoon light. I was someone. 2000, the year everything changed. Gerald died on a Tuesday. Heart attack. Massive. He was 43 years old, coaching Terrence's Little League team, and he just stopped. By the time the ambulance got there, he was already gone. Terrence was 8. I was 40. And just like that, I became the only parent, the only income, the only everything. I won't lie and say it was easy. There were nights I cried so hard I thought I'd turn inside out. Nights when I looked at the bills spread across the kitchen table and couldn't see how the math would ever work. But I was raised by a mother who'd picked cotton as a child, who told me that Williams women don't break. We bend and then we stand back up. So I stood back up. I took a second job. Kept working as a nurse at the county hospital during the day, 12-hour shifts that left my feet swollen and my back aching. Then I'd come home, help Terrence with his homework, make sure he ate something that wasn't cereal, and after he went to bed, I'd do bookkeeping for small businesses until my eyes blurred. But I kept the roses. Even when I was so tired I could barely stand, I'd spend 20 minutes every Saturday morning with those flowers. Because a person needs something beautiful that's just for them, something that reminds them they're more than their exhaustion. I kept baking the peach cobbler too, every Sunday, without fail. Terrence would help me, his small hands carefully measuring the sugar, his tongue sticking out in concentration just like his daddy's used to. Those Sunday afternoons in the kitchen, flour on our clothes and the oven warming the whole house, those were when we felt like a family again. Smaller than before, but still whole. And I kept singing. Because Sister Margaret was right. It was how I talked to God. And I needed to talk to him a lot in those days. There was something else I did in those years, something I'm proud of even now. I saved. Every spare dollar, every overtime shift, every tax refund, I put it away because I was determined that Terrence would have what Gerald and I never had, a college education, a foundation, a future that wasn't built on exhaustion and second jobs. By 2005, I'd saved enough for a down payment on a 3-bedroom house. Nothing fancy, a ranch-style place built in the 70s with avocado green appliances and carpet that had seen better days. But it had good bones and a backyard big enough for my roses. The mortgage was in my name, Dorothy Marie Williams, sole owner. I hung that mustard yellow scarf Gerald had given me for my 40th birthday, the last birthday we'd had together, on the coat hook by the front door. Every time I saw it, I'd remember his smile when I'd opened the box. "Brightest thing I could find for the brightest woman I know," he'd said. That house became our haven. I painted Terrence's room the blue he wanted, let him pick out dinosaur curtains that he was probably too old for, but loved anyway. I transplanted my roses into the backyard, losing only 2 in the process. I set up my blue reading chair by the living room window and bought a small bookshelf to put beside it. We had traditions. Sunday dinner, pot roast or fried chicken, macaroni and cheese from scratch, collard greens simmered for hours. In the summer, we'd make jam from the peaches at the farmer's market, and Terrence would complain about the heat and the stirring, but he'd beam with pride when we lined up the jars on the counter. At Christmas, we'd spend a whole Saturday decorating, putting up the same slightly crooked artificial tree, hanging the ornaments Gerald and I had collected over the years. I kept a tin box on top of the refrigerator, filled with random buttons, big ones, small ones, brass and plastic and mother of pearl. It was left over from my mother's sewing supplies. Terrence used to love playing with those buttons when he was small, sorting them by color, making patterns, creating whole imaginary worlds where the brass ones were kings and the white pearl ones were queens. These details matter. I need you to remember them because they come back later, and when they do, they'll mean something different. They'll hurt different. 2010, when Terrence met Vanessa. My son was 28 when he brought her home. Vanessa Clark, 26 years old, white, from a family in Buckhead, the wealthy part of Atlanta where the houses have names instead of numbers, and the lawns are maintained by professionals. She had that particular kind of beauty that comes from good orthodontia and expensive highlights, the kind that's carefully constructed to look effortless. I remember the first time I met her. Terrence had been nervous, talking fast, his hands moving the way they always did when he was anxious. "Mom, I just want you to know that Vanessa she's different from the girls I usually date, but she's amazing. Really, you're going to love her." I made my best dinner: the Sunday pot roast, the macaroni and cheese with the crispy top, green beans with bacon, and yes, peach cobbler for dessert. I cleaned the house until it shone, put fresh flowers from the garden on the table, wore my good church dress. Vanessa arrived in a BMW that probably cost more than I'd made in 2 years. She was polite when she shook my hand. I'll give her that. Said the house was charming in a tone that made it clear she meant something else. During dinner, she pushed the food around her plate, took tiny bites of the green beans, skipped the mac and cheese entirely. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Williams," she said with an apologetic smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm on this very specific diet right now. You understand?" I understood. I understood that she thought my cooking wasn't good enough, that my house was too small, too old, too much of everything she'd been raised to look down on. But Terrence looked at her like she'd hung the moon, and when he looked at me with those hopeful eyes, Gerald's eyes, asking me without words if I approved, what could I say? "Of course, sweetheart," I told her. "You eat what works for you." After dinner, she and Terrence sat on the couch while I cleaned up. I could hear her voice from the kitchen, that particular pitch of someone trying to sound interested when they're not. "So this is where you grew up? It's so cozy." Cozy. That word that people use when they mean small. I should have noticed it then. The way she looked at my home like it was a museum exhibit. Something quaint and historical, but definitely not where anyone would actually want to live. The way she touched things with just her fingertips, carefully, as if she might catch something. But I was a mother, and mothers see what they want to see. I saw my son happy. I saw him looking at a woman the way his father had looked at me. And I thought, maybe she's just nervous. Maybe she just needs time. I told myself that love could bridge any gap, that if Terrence loved her, she must have good in her, that people could learn to appreciate things they didn't understand at first. I was wrong about so many things, but I wouldn't know that for years yet. In that moment, watching my son hold her hand, watching him smile in a way I hadn't seen since before his father died, I made a choice. I decided to see the best, to give her the benefit of every doubt, to welcome her into our family with open arms. That choice, that generosity, would cost me almost everything. The engagement. 2011, they got engaged on Valentine's Day. Terrence took her to some fancy restaurant in Buckhead, the kind where the menu doesn't have prices, and the portions are more art than food. He called me afterward, breathless with excitement. "She said yes, Mom, can you believe it? She said yes." I could hear the joy in his voice, pure and uncomplicated, and my heart swelled. This was my baby, my son who I'd raised alone, who'd grown into a good man despite losing his father so young. He deserved happiness. He deserved love. "I'm so happy for you, sweetheart," I said, and I meant it. "When can I see the ring?" They came over the next Sunday. The ring was beautiful, a full carat platinum setting, the kind of ring I'd never even imagined owning. Vanessa held out her hand, and the diamond caught the light from my living room window, throwing little rainbows across the wall. "It's beautiful," I said, taking her hand to look closer. "Terrence, you did good." "Actually," Vanessa said, pulling her hand back gently, "Daddy helped. He knows the jeweler, family friend." Of course he did. We sat in my living room, them on the couch, me in my blue chair, and talked about wedding plans. Or rather, Vanessa talked and I listened. The wedding would be at the Piedmont Driving Club. The dress was coming from a boutique in Virginia Highlands. They were thinking late September, outdoor ceremony, indoor reception, guest list around 200. 200? I repeated, my mind already doing the math I couldn't afford. "Oh, don't worry, Mrs. Williams," Vanessa said with a wave of her hand. Daddy's taking care of everything. He insists. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt something else, something I couldn't quite name. Like I was being politely informed that my contribution wasn't needed, that this wedding, this major milestone in my son's life, was being handled by people who knew better. What about the rehearsal dinner? I asked. Traditionally, that's the groom's family. We're doing it at Canoe, Terrence said quickly. It's this amazing restaurant in Vinings. You're going to love it, Mom. And that's already arranged? Vanessa's parents offered to cover it, he said. They said they wanted to. They've been so generous. There it was again, that feeling, like I was being gently but firmly moved to the side. I'd like to contribute something, I said. This is my son's wedding. Vanessa and Terrence exchanged a look. One of those looks that couples develop, full of unspoken communication. Mom, Terrence said gently, you don't have to worry about any of that. Just come and enjoy yourself. That's what we want. Just come and enjoy yourself. As if I were a guest. As if this weren't my only child, the boy I'd raised alone, the man I'd worked 2 jobs to put through college. But I smiled. I nodded. I said okay, because that's what mothers do, isn't it? We step aside when we're told to. We make ourselves smaller so our children can feel bigger. We swallow our hurt and call it love. The wedding happened in September, just as planned. It was beautiful, I'll give them that. The Piedmont Driving Club was something out of a magazine, all white columns and manicured lawns. Vanessa looked stunning in a dress that probably cost more than my car. Terrence looked happier than I'd seen him since his father died. I wore my best church suit, navy blue, a little old-fashioned maybe, but appropriate. I'd gotten my hair done at the salon, my nails manicured for the first time in years. I sat in the front row, where the mother of the groom is supposed to sit. But I noticed that Vanessa's family took up the first 3 rows on her side, while Terrence's side was more sparse. A few cousins I hadn't seen in years. Sister Margaret and some folks from church. My friend Patricia from the hospital. During the reception, I barely saw my son. He was always at the head table, or dancing with Vanessa, or talking to her father's business associates. When I finally caught him for a dance, the traditional mother-son dance, it lasted less than 2 minutes before Vanessa's mother gently cut in, suggesting it was time for the toasts. I gave my toast, kept it short, kept it sweet, talked about what a good man Terrence had become, how proud his father would be. Several people cried. Terrence hugged me tight and whispered, I love you, Mom. But Vanessa's father's toast went on for 10 minutes. He talked about welcoming Terrence into their family, about the bright future ahead, about the opportunities that awaited them, their family, as if Terrence didn't already have one. I went home that night and sat in my blue chair, still in my navy suit, and tried to identify the feeling in my chest. It wasn't quite sadness. It wasn't quite anger. It was something else. It was the first whisper of disappearing. The first hint that I was being erased, slowly and politely, from my own son's life. But I told myself I was being sensitive. Told myself that this was normal, that when children get married, the dynamics shift. Told myself that I'd raised Terrence to be independent, and this was just what that looked like. I didn't know yet that independence and exclusion aren't the same thing. I didn't know yet that I was standing at the edge of a decade-long erosion, about to lose pieces of myself so gradually that I wouldn't notice until almost nothing was left. All I knew was that my son was married now, and that somehow, in the space of 6 hours, I'd gone from being the center of his world to being a pleasant addition to someone else's story. I hung my navy suit in the closet next to Gerald's mustard yellow scarf, and I told myself everything was fine. Year 1, the changes started so small you could miss them if you weren't paying attention. And I wasn't. Not at first. Sunday dinners had been our tradition for as long as Terrence could remember. Every Sunday at 1 o'clock, we'd sit down together, pot roast or fried chicken, vegetables, cornbread, sweet tea. After Gerald died, it was just the 2 of us, but we never missed a Sunday. Not once in 18 years. The first Sunday after the wedding, they didn't come. Terrence called around noon. Mom, we're running behind. Vanessa had this brunch thing with her sorority sisters. Can we push it to 3? Of course, baby. I'll keep everything warm. 3 o'clock became 5 o'clock. 5 became, we're so sorry, Mom, but we're exhausted. Can we do next week? Next week they came. But Vanessa spent the whole meal checking her phone, pushing the pot roast around her plate. This is really heavy, Mrs. Williams, she said with that apologetic smile I was learning to recognize. Terrence and I are trying to eat lighter, heart health and everything. I looked at my son, expecting him to defend my cooking, to remind her that he'd grown up on these meals and turned out just fine. Instead, he nodded. She's right, Mom. We've been reading about how much salt and fat. I understand, he said, even though I didn't. Even though my pot roast had less salt than anything you'd buy at a restaurant, even though I used lean meat and skimmed the fat off the gravy. But I smiled. I said it was fine. I offered to make salads next time. The next Sunday, they canceled again. Vanessa's not feeling well. The Sunday after that. We've got this thing with her parents. By December, Sunday dinners had become every other week. Then once a month. Then whenever they could fit it in. And when they did come, Vanessa always had something to say. The house is so dark, Mrs. Williams. Have you thought about updating the lighting? This carpet is so 70s. You really should consider hardwood. You know what would really open up this space? Knocking down that wall between the kitchen and dining room. She always said it sweetly, like she was being helpful, like she was trying to improve my life. But what I heard underneath was, your home isn't good enough. You aren't good enough. Terrence never contradicted her. He'd just nod, sometimes adding, Mom, she's got a good eye for this stuff. She studied interior design in college. I'd bite my tongue and change the subject. One Sunday in February, the Sunday after my birthday, which they'd forgotten, I was cleaning up while they sat in the living room. I heard Vanessa's voice, low but clear. How much longer are we going to keep doing this? Sunday dinner at your mom's house like we're still in college? My hand stopped in the soapy water. She looks forward to it, Terrence said quietly. I know, baby, but we have our own life now. We need to establish our own traditions. We can't be stuck doing what she wants every week. It's not every week anymore. It feels like it. And honestly, Terrence, I need you focused on our life, not constantly pulled back into your mother's nostalgia. Our life. Your mother's nostalgia. As if the life I'd built, the traditions I'd maintained through grief and exhaustion and 2 jobs, were nothing but outdated sentiment. As if wanting to see my son once a week made me clingy. I stood at that sink, hands in the cooling water, and felt something shift inside me. Not break, not yet. Just shift, like a foundation settling, cracking in ways you can't see, but can somehow feel. I dried my hands, walked back into the living room with a smile. You 2 want coffee? I made decaf. Vanessa looked at her phone. Actually, Mrs. Williams, we should get going. Early morning tomorrow. It was 6:30 on a Sunday evening. They left. I watched Terrence's car pull away, and I noticed something. He didn't look back at the house. Didn't wave from the window like he used to when he was young. I went back inside to my empty house, to the dinner I'd spent 3 hours preparing. Most of it now in Tupperware containers I knew they'd never take home. I sat in my blue chair, but I didn't pick up a book. I just sat there as the room grew dark around me, wondering when exactly my son had started seeing me as an obligation instead of his mother. Year 2 to 3. In March of 2012, Terrence called with excitement in his voice. Mom, we found a house! You have to see it. It's perfect. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. This amazing kitchen Vanessa's been dreaming about. That's wonderful, baby. Where is it? Brookhaven, near her parents. The neighborhood is beautiful, Mom. Tree-lined streets. Good schools for when we have kids. How much? $350. We're putting down $70,000. I did the quick math. Terrence had a good job as an accountant, and Vanessa worked part-time at an art gallery, but $70,000 was more than they should have saved in 2 years of marriage. That's a lot of money for a down payment. I know. We've been really careful with our finances. A pause. But actually, we're about $20,000 short. The bank approved us, but a bigger down payment would get us a better rate. And well, I was hoping maybe you could help us out. Just this once, we'll pay you back, I promise. Just this once. Those words should have been a warning. But what was I supposed to say? This was my son, asking for help to build his future. To start a family. What kind of mother says no to that? How much do you need? $20,000 would get us to the full amount. I know it's a lot, Mom, but it's an investment. This house is going to appreciate like crazy. We'll have the equity to pay you back in a couple years. Easy. $20,000. That was most of what I had left in savings after putting Terrence through college. Let me think about it, I said. Mom, we need to move fast. There are other offers. Please. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. 3 days later, I transferred the money. They bought the house. I got invited to see it after they'd already moved in, after Vanessa had already decorated it in her minimalist style. All whites and grays and expensive-looking furniture that you weren't supposed to actually sit on. What do you think, Mrs. Williams? She asked, gesturing around the living room. It's beautiful, I said, because it was. But it was also cold. There were no family photos, no personal touches, nothing that said Terrence lived there except for one picture of their wedding on the mantel. Where should I put this? I asked, holding up the quilt I'd brought, a housewarming gift I'd made myself, hand-stitched over 3 months with fabric from Gerald's old shirts mixed with new material. Vanessa's smile tightened. Oh, that's so sweet. But we're really going for a specific aesthetic. Maybe Terrence could use it in his office? The office was a small room at the back of the house, barely bigger than a closet. My quilt, made with love and my husband's memory stitched into every square, ended up folded in a closet. I saw it there later, on top of a box of Christmas decorations they hadn't unpacked. In June, they needed help with the kitchen renovation. The contractor found some water damage. Another $8,000. Mom, I hate to ask, but we're tapped out from the furniture and the move. Could you possibly? I could. I did. In September, Vanessa's car died. It's not worth fixing, Mom. We need something reliable. Just a loan. We'll pay you back when we get our tax return. The tax return came. They took a vacation to Napa Valley instead. By December 2013, I'd given them nearly $40,000. Terrence kept saying, pay you back, but the words had started to sound like a reflex, something he said to make us both feel better about what was really happening. I was funding their lifestyle, and they'd stopped pretending otherwise. Year 3 to 4, Amara was born on a Tuesday in April, 6 weeks early. I got the call at work, dropped everything, drove to the hospital with my heart in my throat. When I got there, Vanessa's parents were already in the room, her mother holding the baby, her father beaming, both of them gathered around Vanessa's bed like they were posing for a portrait. I stood in the doorway, still in my scrubs from the hospital where I worked, and waited to be noticed. Finally, Terrence looked up. Mom, you made it. Of course I made it. She's my grandbaby. Vanessa's mother, Linda, finally looked at me. Dorothy, hello. Isn't she precious? She held Amara for another full minute before finally, reluctantly handing her to me. The baby was so small, 5 pounds, 4 ounces. She had Terrence's nose, Gerald's chin. When I held her, something in my chest cracked open, not breaking but blooming. This was my son's child, my granddaughter, a piece of Gerald living on in this tiny, perfect person. Hello, sweet girl, I whispered. I'm your Grandma Dorothy. We're actually going with Nana and Pop-Pop for my parents, Vanessa said from the bed. And we thought maybe... Grammy? For you? Grammy, like I was some character in a children's book. Generic, interchangeable. I'd prefer Grandma, I said quietly. Vanessa and Linda exchanged a look. Grammy is more modern, Linda said. Don't you think, Terrence? My son, holding his wife's hand, nodded. Grammy's cute, Mom. Amara will love it. I held my granddaughter and said nothing. What was I supposed to do? Argue about what this baby would call me while she was still in her first hour of life? They came home from the hospital 3 days later. I'd taken a week off work, ready to help however they needed. I'd learned everything I could about premature babies, bought special bottles, researched the best ways to help her gain weight. When I arrived at their house with groceries and a casserole, Vanessa met me at the door. "Mrs. Williams, that's so sweet, but we've got it under control." "I'm here to help. You're recovering. The baby's premature. We hired a night nurse. She's amazing, very experienced with preemies. And my mother is coming during the day for the first 2 weeks." I looked past her into the house. Linda was already there, sitting in the nursery rocker, holding Amara. "We're really trying to limit visitors," Vanessa said, that apologetic smile back. "Doctor's orders. Preemies are so susceptible to germs." "I'm a nurse. I know how to wash my hands." "I know, but we're being really careful. Maybe in a few weeks when she's stronger." The door closed. Not slammed. Vanessa would never be that rude. Just closed, gently, firmly, with me on the outside. I sat in my car and cried for the first time since Gerald's funeral. Year 5 to 6. The erasure happened so gradually, I barely noticed it was happening. First, my name stopped appearing on birthday party invitations. Amara turned 1, then 2, then 3. I'd find out about the parties through Facebook, seeing photos of elaborate themed celebrations, Vanessa's family and friends filling the background, their house decorated like something from a magazine. "Why didn't you tell me about Amara's party?" I'd ask Terrence. "Oh, Mom, it was such a small thing. Just family." Just family. And apparently I wasn't that anymore. When I did see Amara, it was brief and supervised. I'd be allowed an hour, maybe 2, always at their house, always with Vanessa hovering nearby. I brought gifts, dolls, books, the wooden toys I'd played with as a child. Vanessa would thank me, then later I'd see them donated to Goodwill, posted on Facebook. Decluttering the playroom. So freeing. "Those toys have chemicals," Vanessa explained once. "We're very conscious about what Amara is exposed to. My garden died that year. I didn't have time to tend it anymore because I was always waiting for Terrence to call, always ready to drop everything if they needed me. The roses withered, the soil went dry. By the end of summer, all 17 varieties were gone, leaving nothing but thorny sticks and hard ground. I quit the church choir too. Rehearsal was on Wednesday nights, and Wednesday was the night Terrence sometimes called, asking if I could babysit because their regular sitter canceled. I needed to be available, so I told Sister Margaret I had to take a break. "Just for a little while," I said. That little while turned into forever. My voice, which had once filled that church, went silent. My blue reading chair, the one I'd reupholstered myself, where I'd spent countless evenings with Toni Morrison and Maya Angelou, disappeared one day. Terrence had asked to borrow it. "Just temporarily, Mom. Our guest room needs furniture and we can't afford anything right now. We'll give it back in a few months." The few months became years. The chair lived in their house, in a room I was never invited to see, serving guests I never met. I stopped cooking my grandmother's recipes. What was the point? No one wanted them. Vanessa said they were too heavy. Terrence said he was watching his cholesterol. The notebook with the peach cobbler recipe, the one with pages the color of tea and my grandmother's fading handwriting, sat on the shelf gathering dust. I tried once to teach Vanessa how to make it. "That's so sweet, Mrs. Williams, but honestly, we just order desserts from this amazing bakery. It's easier and probably lower calorie." Easier, lower calorie. Never mind that the recipe had been passed down for 4 generations. Never mind that it connected Amara to her great-great-grandmother. Never mind that some things are worth the time they take. I worked more hours instead. Picked up extra shifts at the hospital because my bank account kept draining. Every time I thought I'd built it back up, there'd be another call. "Mom, the roof needs repairs. Just $5,000. "Mom, Amara's preschool requires a deposit. Just $3,000. "Mom, we're really struggling this month. Just $2,000 to get us through." Just, the word that makes theft sound like a favor. I turned 60 in August 2017. I didn't have a party, didn't expect one. But I hoped that maybe Terrence would remember. Maybe take me to dinner, just the 2 of us. Maybe bring Amara over for cake. The day came and went. No call, no card, no text message. At 9 o'clock that night, I called him. "Happy birthday to me," I said, trying to keep my voice light. Silence on the other end. Then, "Oh my God, Mom, I'm so sorry. We've been so busy with Amara's activities, and Vanessa's been stressed about work, and I'm sorry. I'll make it up to you." "It's okay," I said, because that's what I always said. "We can celebrate next week." We never did, but 2 weeks later, he called. "Mom, we need to talk about something. The kitchen needs a complete renovation. The appliances are original to the house. The cabinets are falling apart. We got a quote, $25,000. I know it's a lot, but the house value will increase and—" I stopped listening. Somewhere in that moment, standing in my kitchen at 9:30 on a random Tuesday, my hand gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white, something fundamental shifted. I had just turned 60. I'd worked 2 jobs for 15 years, put my son through college, given him $40,000 for his house, helped with every emergency, every crisis, every just this once. And he hadn't remembered my birthday, but he remembered my bank account. "Mom, are you there?" "I'm here." "So, can you help? We'll pay you back. We always do." No, they didn't. They never had. Not once in 6 years. But I said yes anyway, because I didn't know how to say no, because I'd spent so long believing that love meant giving until you had nothing left that I'd forgotten love was supposed to go both ways. I transferred the money the next day. When COVID hit in March 2020, I thought maybe things would change. Maybe being locked down would remind people what mattered. Maybe my son would reach out more, check on his aging mother who worked in a hospital during a pandemic. The first month he called once a week, just to check in, he said, to make sure I was okay. The calls were always the same. "Hey Mom, how are you?" "I'm fine, baby. Tired. We're short-staffed at the hospital and—" "That's good. Glad you're staying healthy. Listen, we're all fine here too. Amara's doing virtual school, driving us crazy. Anyway, I should go. Love you." Click. 5 minutes. Maybe less. I'd spend the rest of the week alone in my house, going to work at a hospital where people were dying by the dozens, coming home to silence and waiting for the next 5-minute call. I started cooking again, just for something to do. Made full meals, pot roast, fried chicken, collard greens, and then put them in containers and drove them to Terrence's house. I'd leave them on the porch, ring the doorbell, wave from the sidewalk as he picked them up. Sometimes Amara would wave back from the window. Sometimes Vanessa would text, "Thanks for the food." Never a phone call. Never an invitation inside, even though we could have talked through the screen door. Never a, "How are you really doing, Mom? Are you scared? Are you lonely? Do you need anything?" Amara turned 8 that April. They had a Zoom party, 30 people in little squares on a screen, singing happy birthday with a half-second delay that made it sound like chaos. I was in one of those squares. I'd baked her a cake, chocolate with vanilla frosting, her favorite. I held it up to the camera when it was time for the song, but my audio was muted. "Sorry, Mrs. Williams," Vanessa said afterward in the chat. "Your connection was really unstable. We had to mute you." My internet was fine. I'd tested it before the call, but I said nothing. What could I say? I watched my granddaughter blow out her candles on a screen, surrounded by people who weren't me, and I felt something I'd been trying not to feel for years. I felt like a ghost, like I was already gone and no one had noticed yet. It was a Saturday morning when everything finally crystallized. I was standing in the grocery store in the coffee aisle, holding 2 bags. One was the brand I used to buy. The good stuff, freshly roasted, the kind that made the whole house smell like comfort when you opened the bag. $8. The other was the store brand. $4. I'd been buying the $4 coffee for years, telling myself it tasted the same, telling myself the difference didn't matter. But I knew it did matter. I knew I'd chosen the cheaper coffee every week for a decade, because every dollar I saved was a dollar I could send to my son. I stood there in that fluorescent-lit aisle, holding both bags, and I did the math. $4 saved per week, 52 weeks a year, 10 years, $2,000. $2,000 I'd saved on coffee alone. And that wasn't counting the meals I'd skipped, the clothes I hadn't bought, the medical appointments I'd postponed, the car repairs I'd done myself with YouTube videos because paying a mechanic meant less money for Terrence. I put the expensive coffee in my cart. Then I went home and sat down at my kitchen table with my bank statement. Balance, $847.23. After 45 years of working, after 2 jobs for 15 years, after raising a son alone, after putting him through college, after giving him nearly $200,000 for his house, his cars, his emergencies, his life. $847. I sat there for a long time, that number burning itself into my brain. Then my phone rang. "Mom!" Terrence's voice was bright with excitement. "Great news! We're going on a cruise. Vanessa found this amazing deal for the Caribbean. 2 weeks in June. We've been so stressed with everything, we really need this." "That sounds wonderful, baby." "Yeah, and the best part is we can actually afford it because you just made that last mortgage payment, right? So we don't have that expense anymore." The last mortgage payment. The one that had emptied my savings account down to 3 digits. "Right," I said sad. "Perfect. Anyway, I wanted to give you a heads up. We won't be around for a couple weeks, but you'll be fine on your own, right? You're always so independent." Independent? Is that what he thought this was? "Actually, Terrence, I was hoping maybe I could come with you. We haven't spent real time together in—" "Oh." The brightness in his voice dimmed. "Mom, this is kind of a family vacation. You know, just the 3 of us. Vanessa really needs this time to decompress, and Amar has been asking for a trip with just Mom and Dad. You understand, right? Just the 3 of us. Just family." I closed my eyes. "Mom? You understand, right?" And there it was. The moment I'd been avoiding for 10 years. The moment I had to admit the truth I'd been denying. I wasn't family anymore. I was the bank. I was the emergency contact. I was the backup plan. But I wasn't family. "I understand," I heard myself say. "Great. Okay, I've got to run. Vanessa's calling me. Love you, Mom." Click. I sat there with the phone in my hand, staring at that bank statement. $847.23. 45 years of work. 25 years of sacrifice. 10 years of giving everything. And I wasn't even worth a phone call on my birthday. I wasn't even worth a seat at their table. I wasn't even worth 2 weeks of their time on a cruise I'd helped pay for. Something in me, something that had been bending and bending for years, finally snapped. Not with noise, not with drama, just a quiet, clean break. I opened my filing cabinet and pulled out a blue folder. Inside was the deed to the house Terrence was living in. The house with my name on it. Dorothy Marie Williams, sole owner. The house I'd never transferred to him because he'd always said, "Why would you do that, Mom? We're family." Family. I looked at that deed for a long time. Then I picked up my phone and called someone I hadn't spoken to in months. "Walter? It's Dorothy Williams. I need your help. It's about the house." I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my blue reading chair. No, not mine anymore. Terrence had taken that years ago. I sat on the couch in my living room, the one I'd bought secondhand 20 years ago, the one with the worn armrest where I always rested my coffee. The house was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. Outside, the sun was starting to come up, that early morning light that turns everything soft and gold. Gerald used to love this time of day. He'd wake up before me, make coffee, and sit on the back porch watching the world wake up. I thought about him now. What would he think if he could see what had happened to our son? Would he be disappointed in Terrence? Or would he be disappointed in me for letting it get this far? The bank statement was still on the coffee table where I'd left it. $847.23. I picked it up and looked at it again, as if the numbers might have changed overnight, as if I might have imagined it all. But I hadn't. This was real. This was my life. This was what I had left after giving everything. My phone buzzed. A text from Terrence. "Morning, Mom. Heading to the cruise port today. So excited. We'll send pics. Love you." A heart emoji, as if that made up for everything. as if love was just a symbol you could drop into a text message and call it done. I set the phone down and went to make coffee. I stood in my kitchen, the kitchen where I'd made countless Sunday dinners, where I'd taught Terrence to crack eggs and measure flour, where my grandmother's recipe notebook still sat on the shelf gathering dust. And I made a decision. Not out of anger, not out of revenge, out of something much simpler and much more powerful: self-preservation. I was 64 years old. I had, if I was lucky, maybe 20 good years left. Maybe less. My back hurt from decades of nursing. My knees ached when I climbed stairs. I was tired in a way that sleep couldn't fix. And I didn't want to spend whatever time I had left waiting for phone calls that never came. Waiting to be remembered. Waiting to matter to people who had decided I didn't. I called Walter Thompson at 8 o'clock that morning. Walter had been Gerald's best friend. He'd been at our wedding, had held Terrence when he was baptized, had helped me navigate the legal paperwork after Gerald died. He was a lawyer now, semi-retired, the kind of man who'd drive 3 hours to help a friend change a tire. "Dorothy," he said, his voice warm with surprise. "It's been too long. How are you?" "I need legal advice, Walter. About a house." There was a pause. Then, "Come over. I'll make us some breakfast." Walter lived in a small ranch house across town, the kind of place where the furniture was comfortable instead of fashionable, and the coffee was always hot. He opened the door in jeans and a flannel shirt, reading glasses pushed up on his bald head. When he saw my face, his smile faded. "Come in, Dot. Sit down. You look like you haven't slept." I hadn't, but I also didn't feel tired. I felt clear, like I'd been walking through fog for years and suddenly it had lifted. We sat at his kitchen table. He poured coffee, the good kind, I noticed, and pushed a plate of toast toward me. "Tell me what's going on." So I did. I told him everything. The 10 years of erosion, the forgotten birthdays, the money I'd given that was never paid back, the Sunday dinners that had stopped, the granddaughter I barely knew, the cruise they were taking with the last mortgage payment I'd made on a house that was still in my name. Walter listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with each detail. When I finished, he sat back and was quiet for a long moment. "Dorothy," he said finally, "you know what this is, don't you? This isn't family helping family. This is financial abuse." The word hit me like cold water. Abuse. "It's not abuse," I said automatically. "Terrence wouldn't. Maybe he doesn't see it that way. Maybe he's convinced himself it's normal. But that doesn't change what it is." Walter pulled a notepad toward him. "Let's talk about the house. You said it's still in your name?" "Yes. We always talked about transferring it, but we never got around to it. Terrence would say, 'Why would you do that, Mom? We're family.'" Walter's jaw tightened. "How much have you contributed to that house? Total?" I did the math in my head. Initial down payment was $20,000. I've been making about 80% of the mortgage payments for 9 years. Property taxes for the last 3 years. The kitchen renovation. New roof? Probably $180,000, give or take. And what has Terrence contributed? Maybe $40,000? He paid some months when things were good. Walter wrote this down, his pen moving fast across the paper. "Dorothy, legally, that house is yours. You can sell it at any time without their permission. The only thing you're obligated to do is give them reasonable time to remove their personal belongings, usually 30 days. The room seemed to tilt. "Sell it? You have that right. And given that you've contributed over 80% of the value, you'd be entitled to the same percentage of the sale price after you reimburse them for their documented contributions." I sat there, holding my coffee, trying to process what he was saying. I could sell the house. I could take back what was mine. I could stop being the bank that never got repaid. "What would they do?" I asked quietly. "Where would they go?" "That's not your responsibility, Dot. They're adults with jobs and income. They can rent an apartment like millions of other people do. But I understand this is hard. They're your family." "No," I said, and my voice surprised me with its steadiness. "They're not. Not really. Family doesn't forget your birthday." Family doesn't only call when they need money. Family doesn't exclude you from their lives and then expect you to fund those lives. Walter reached across the table and put his hand over mine. What do you want to do? I thought about my bank statement, about my empty savings account, about the life I'd given up, my roses, my singing, my reading, myself, for people who had made it clear I didn't matter. I want to sell the house, I said. I want to take back my life. Then that's what we'll do. Walter moved fast. He knew a real estate agent, Patricia Moore, a black woman in her 50s who'd built a successful career selling homes in upscale Atlanta neighborhoods. When she came to see the house Terrence was living in, she walked through slowly, taking notes, nodding. "This is a good property," she said. "Brookhaven is hot right now. We can move this quickly, especially if you're willing to price it competitively." "I don't want to price it low," I said. "I want what it's worth, but I want it sold before they get back from their cruise." Patricia looked at me for a long moment. Then she smiled. Not a business smile, but a real one. One that said she understood. "Honey, I see this story more often than you'd think. Women who give everything and get nothing back. You're doing the right thing. I'm not trying to hurt them. I know, you're trying to save yourself. That's different." She listed it that afternoon. Within 3 days, we had 2 offers. Within a week, we had a cash buyer willing to close in 2 weeks. The house that Terrence and Vanessa thought was theirs sold for $425,000. While Walter handled the paperwork, I did something I hadn't done in years. I took care of myself. I went to the store and bought the $8 coffee. Not just 1 bag, 3. I bought fresh flowers for my kitchen table. I bought a new book by an author I'd been wanting to read. I bought a nice bottle of wine and drank a glass while sitting on my back porch, watching the sunset. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't waiting for the phone to ring. Wasn't wondering if Terrence needed something. Wasn't calculating how much I could spare from my next paycheck. I was just Dorothy, sitting on her porch, drinking wine, watching the sky turn pink and orange. It felt like coming back to life. On day 10, I got a phone call that surprised me. "Mrs. Williams? This is Helen Clark, Vanessa's mother." I nearly dropped the phone. In 10 years, Helen had barely spoken to me. We'd been civil at the wedding, polite at Amara's birth, but that was it. She was Vanessa's mother. I was the other grandmother. We existed in separate orbits. "Hello, Helen. I hope this isn't an imposition, but I wanted to speak with you. Could we meet for coffee?" We met the next day at a Starbucks halfway between our houses. Helen looked older than I remembered. Her blonde hair more gray now, her face lined with worry. She got straight to the point. "I know what my daughter has been doing to you." I blinked. "Excuse me?" "Vanessa told me years ago about her plan, to get your house. She said it was an investment strategy, that you'd eventually transfer the deed, and when you did, they'd have significant equity. She talked about it like it was smart financial planning." Helen's hands were wrapped around her coffee cup so tight her knuckles were white. "I told her it was wrong, that you were Terrence's mother, not a bank." But she didn't listen. She never listens. I sat very still. Did Terrence know? About the plan? Helen looked away. "I think he went along with it. Maybe not at first, but over time, yes. Vanessa can be very persuasive." "Why are you telling me this?" She looked back at me and I saw tears in her eyes. "Because I'm watching my daughter become someone I don't recognize. Because I see how she treats you, and I see my own future in it. I'm 72, Mrs. Williams. What happens when I'm no longer useful to her? Will I be erased too?" We sat in silence for a moment. "I'm selling the house," I said quietly. Helen's eyes widened. "To help if you'll let me. Amara shouldn't to help if you'll let me. Amara shouldn't lose both her grandmothers because of her parents' mistakes." That conversation changed something. I wasn't alone in this. I had an ally, and it was the last person I'd expected. Terrence and Vanessa's cruise ended on a Friday. They were due home Saturday afternoon. On Friday evening, I drove to the house one last time. The new owners had agreed to let me have until Saturday morning to remove Terrence and Vanessa's belongings. Walter had hired a moving company. Professional, efficient, courteous. They packed everything, clothes, furniture, toys, dishes, all of it, into a climate-controlled storage unit I'd rented and prepaid for 3 months. I walked through the empty house one last time. The house my money had bought. The house where my son had lived, where my granddaughter had taken her first steps, where I'd been allowed to visit but never truly welcome. It felt like saying goodbye to a dream. I left a letter on the kitchen counter, typed on Walter's law firm letterhead. This property has been legally sold. Your personal belongings have been moved to a climate-controlled storage unit located at 1847 Memorial Drive, Unit 23. You have 90 days to retrieve these items. The storage has been prepaid for 3 months. All future communication should be directed to Walter Thompson, attorney at law, at the number below. The sale was conducted in accordance with Georgia property law. As sole owner of the property, Dorothy Williams retained the legal right to sell without co-owner permission. You will receive a check for your proportional contribution to the property value, 20%, minus storage and legal fees within 30 business days. I signed it, left it on the counter, and walked out. I didn't look back. My phone started ringing at 2:47 p.m. on Saturday. Terrence, Vanessa. Terrence, Vanessa. I didn't answer. The voicemails started coming. First confused, then angry, then desperate. Mom, what the hell is this? Where's all our stuff? Mrs. Williams, this is illegal. You can't just sell someone's house. Mom, please pick up. Please, we need to talk about this. I blocked their numbers and gave my phone to Walter. Let me handle this, he said. You focus on you. So I did. I took the money from the house sale, my 80% minus expenses, and I did something I'd never done in my entire life. I put myself first. I rented a small apartment on the Georgia coast. 1 bedroom, tiny kitchen, but with a balcony that overlooked the ocean. The rent was reasonable. The view was priceless. I bought new furniture. Not expensive, just mine. A comfortable couch, a proper bed. A small kitchen table where I could sit and watch the sunrise. I bought packets of seeds, rose seeds, and planted them in containers on my balcony. Not 17 varieties like before, just 3. The 3 I'd loved most, including the one Gerald had given me for our 10th anniversary. I retrieved Gerald's mustard yellow scarf from storage and hung it by the door. It still smelled faintly of his cologne, or maybe I was imagining it. Either way, it made me smile. I rejoined a church, a small Baptist church 2 blocks from my apartment where nobody knew my story or my shame, where I could just be Dorothy who sang alto and showed up on Sundays. On my first Sunday there, the choir director asked if I'd be interested in joining them. I said yes. When I opened my mouth to sing Amazing Grace, my voice cracked at first. It had been so long, but then it steadied, grew stronger, filled the small sanctuary. Sister Margaret had been right all those years ago. This was how I talked to God. And I had so much to tell him. Walter called on a Wednesday morning. Terrence wants to meet. He's requesting mediation. I don't want to see him. I understand, but I think you should hear him out. Not for his sake, for yours. So you can move forward without wondering. I agreed with conditions. Neutral location, Walter present, no Vanessa. We met in Walter's conference room the following Friday. Terrence looked terrible, thinner, dark circles under his eyes. His shirt was wrinkled and he hadn't shaved. When he saw me, he stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. Mom! Sit down, Terrence. My voice was calm. Cold, maybe, but calm. He sat. Walter gestured for me to sit across from him. I did, my purse in my lap, my hands folded on top of it. You wanted to talk, I said. So talk. Terrence's eyes were red. Mom, why? Why would you do this to us? That was our home. Amara's home. You took everything from us. I took what was mine. We've been living there for 9 years. In a house I paid for. In a house that was never legally transferred to you. In a house I funded while you took vacations and bought new cars and sent Amara to expensive camps. We were going to pay you back? When, Terrence? The question came out sharper than I intended. When were you going to pay me back? Because in 9 years, I never saw a single payment. Not one. You said pay you back the way people say, have a nice day. Words that don't mean anything. He flinched. That house was 80% mine. I paid for it. I maintained it. I kept the taxes current. You lived in it and forgot I existed except when you needed more money. That's not fair. What's not fair? I said, and now my voice was shaking. Is that you forgot my birthday. For 3 years straight. What's not fair is that I see my granddaughter maybe 10 times a year, always supervised, always on your terms. What's not fair is that you only call when you need money. What's not fair is that you invited me on exactly 0 family vacations while I funded all of them. Mom, that's not... Vanessa thought. I don't care what Vanessa thought. You're a grown man, Terrence. You made choices. You chose her comfort over my dignity. You chose her family over yours. Every single time. Tears were running down his face now. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. You didn't want to realize. It was easier not to see. What do you want from me? Tell me how to fix this. I looked at my son, this man I'd raised alone, this child I'd given everything for. And I felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the possibility of it someday. I want you to see me, Terrence. Not as your mother who you can call when you need money. Not as the grandmother you trot out for photo ops. I want you to see me as Dorothy. A person with feelings and needs and dreams of her own. I do see you. No, you don't. If you did, you would have remembered my birthday. If you did, you would have invited me on that cruise. If you did, you would have noticed that I gave up everything. My garden, my singing, my savings, myself. And you would have told me to stop. My voice broke on the last word. But you didn't notice. Or you didn't care. Either way, it can't continue. I can't be the bank anymore, Terrence. I can't be the emergency contact you only remember in emergencies. I can't be invisible in my own son's life. He was crying openly now, his shoulders shaking. I love you, he said. I do love you, Mom. I know you do, but love without respect isn't enough. Love without consideration is just another kind of using. The words hung in the air between us. I sold the house to save myself, I continued quietly. Not to punish you. I needed you to understand that there are consequences to taking someone for granted, that you can't treat people like they're disposable and expect them to keep giving forever. Where do we go from here? He asked, his voice broken. I thought about that question, about all the years of pain, all the ways I'd disappeared, all the moments I'd lost. But I also thought about Amara. About the little girl who shouldn't have to pay for her parents' mistakes. We go forward slowly, I said. If you want to be in my life, really in it, not just when you need something, then you need to show me, not with words, with actions, with time, with actually seeing me. I can do that. I will do that. Maybe. We'll see. I stood up. You'll get the money you're owed. 20% of the sale minus expenses. Walter will handle that. I've paid for 3 months of storage. After that, it's your responsibility. Where are you living? That's none of your business right now. His face crumpled. Mom, please. You want back into my life, Terrence? You earn it. You show up. You remember birthdays. You make time that isn't about what you need from me. And maybe eventually we can build something real. But it won't be what it was. That's gone. You made sure of that. I walked to the door, then stopped and looked back. I forgive you, I said. But forgiveness doesn't mean going back. It means I'm free from the hurt. And you're free to become better. Whether you do or not, that's up to you. I left him sitting there, crying, with Walter placing a gentle hand on his shoulder, and I walked out into the sunshine, feeling lighter than I had in 10 years. 3 months later, I wake up at 6 in the morning, not because I have to, but because I want to see the sunrise. The ocean outside my window is turning from gray to pink to gold, each wave catching the light like liquid metal. I can hear seagulls calling, the distant sound of a fishing boat's engine, the whisper of wind through the seagrass. I make coffee, the $8 kind, and carry it out to my small balcony. Gerald's mustard yellow scarf is draped over my shoulders. It's too warm for a scarf, really, but I wear it anyway. It makes me feel like he's here, watching the sunrise with me. The roses in my containers are blooming. Small blooms, not like the massive flowers I used to grow, but perfect in their own way. One of them, the variety Gerald gave me, has 3 buds that opened yesterday. Deep red, velvet soft, with that old rose scent that smells like memory. I water them carefully, humming to myself. I realize I'm humming, "His eye is on the sparrow." I realize I'm happy, not the complicated conditional happiness that depends on other people's approval. Just happy, content, at peace. My phone buzzes. A text from Helen. "Amara and I are making peach cobbler today. Can we stop by this afternoon so she can show you?" I smile and text back. I'd love that. Helen has become an unexpected friend. She brings Amara to visit every other Sunday, without asking Terrence or Vanessa's permission. "I'm her grandmother," she told them firmly, "and so is Dorothy. You don't get to decide who she loves." Amara is 8 now, and when she visits, we do things I never got to do before. We collect shells on the beach. We read books on my couch. We bake together, using my grandmother's recipe notebook, which I finally took down from the shelf and opened. Last week, Amara asked, "Grandma Dorothy, why do you live here instead of near us?" I knelt down to her level. "Because Grandma needed to live with herself first, baby. Sometimes grown-ups forget who they are when they're too busy taking care of everyone else. I needed to remember who Dorothy was." "And did you remember?" I smiled and touched her cheek. "Yes, sweetheart, I did." Terrence has been trying. I'll give him that. He calls every week now, not to ask for money, just to talk. Sometimes the conversations are awkward. Sometimes I can hear Vanessa in the background, arguing about something. But he calls. Last month he drove down for a visit. Just him, no Vanessa. We walked on the beach and he told me they were separated. "She can't forgive me for letting you sell the house," he said. "She says I should have stopped you, should have had you committed or something, that you weren't in your right mind." "And what do you think?" He was quiet for a long time. "I think you were in your right mind for the first time in years, and I think I'm finally seeing you clearly. We're not where we were. We may never be. But we're building something new, something honest, something where I'm not invisible. It's not perfect. Some days are hard. Some days I'm angry all over again. Remembering all the birthdays he forgot, all the times I was excluded, all the ways I disappeared. But some days are good. Some days he tells me about Amara's school play or sends me a funny meme or says, "I love you, Mom," and I can hear that he means it. I'm learning that healing isn't linear, that forgiveness is a process, not a moment, that rebuilding trust takes time. I'm learning that I deserve that time. Helen and Amara arrive at 2 o'clock. Amara runs to me, a ball of energy in a yellow sundress, her braids bouncing. She's carrying a small container. "Grandma Dorothy, we made cobbler. Grammy Helen helped, but I did all the measuring." I hug her tight, breathing in the smell of childhood, sunshine and vanilla and innocent joy. "Did you use the recipe from the notebook?" "Yes, and we didn't order from the bakery. We made it ourselves." Helen comes in behind her, carrying a larger dish. "I made one too. Thought we could compare." We sit on my small balcony, the 3 of us, eating peach cobbler and watching the ocean. Amara chatters about school, about her new teacher, about the stray cat that's been coming to their yard. Helen and I exchange glances. We don't talk about Terrence and Vanessa in front of Amara, but we both know things are difficult. Helen has told me that Vanessa is bitter, angry, convinced that I'm a vindictive old woman who destroyed her life out of spite. I've stopped caring what Vanessa thinks. That's new too. Not caring, not trying to prove myself, not bending myself into shapes that might make someone else comfortable. After Cobbler, Amara asks if she can play on the beach. Helen and I sit on the balcony, watching her collect shells, and Helen says quietly, "She talks about you all the time, about Grandma Dorothy by the ocean. You're becoming her favorite story. She's mine too. Vanessa doesn't like it, the visits. I know. I don't care." Helen takes a sip of her tea. "I spent too many years letting my daughter dictate my relationships. I'm 72, Dorothy. I'm not spending whatever time I have left being controlled by someone who can't see past her own ego." I look at her, this woman who was supposed to be my adversary, who's become my ally, and I smile. That makes two of us. After Helen and Amara leave, I clean up the dishes and settle into my new reading chair. Not the blue one from before, but a comfortable recliner I bought at a furniture store. I'm reading Toni Morrison again. Beloved. I'd started it years ago and never finished. Always too tired, always too worried, always too busy waiting for someone to need me. Now I have time. Now I can lose myself in the words, let them wash over me, feel what the author wanted me to feel. My phone buzzes. Terrence. "Mom, I know it's late, but I wanted to tell you something. I got into therapy, individual therapy, to work on everything. The therapist said I have to take responsibility for my choices, for how I treated you. She said loving someone isn't enough if you don't show them respect." I read the text twice. Then I write back, "I'm proud of you for doing that. It takes courage. Can I call you tomorrow? Just to talk?" "Yes." "But Terrence, I need you to understand something." "What?" "I'm rebuilding my life. You can be part of it, but you're not the center of it anymore. I'm the center of it. Me. Dorothy." 3 dots appear, disappear, appear again. I understand, and that's how it should be. I'm sorry it took me so long to see that. I set the phone down and go back to my book. I wake up early again, make my coffee, and sit on the balcony watching the sun rise. This time I bring my grandmother's recipe notebook with me. I flip through the pages, her handwriting, faded but still legible. Recipes for pound cake and cornbread and collard greens, and yes, peach cobbler, but also notes in the margins. Little pieces of her life. Made this for James when he came home from the war. He cried. Sunday dinner 1952, the whole family together. Dorothy's favorite. She always wants seconds. That last one makes me pause. Dorothy's favorite. I was someone's favorite once. Someone wrote it down, made it permanent, wanted to remember. I flip to a blank page at the back and pick up a pen. I write September 2021. Made peach cobbler with Amara. She measured everything herself. Her smile was the best part. I'm adding to the story now. I'm not just remembering the past. I'm creating new memories worth writing down. I close the notebook and look out at the ocean. Somewhere in the last few months, maybe when I chose the $8 coffee, maybe when I signed those papers, maybe when I walked out of Walter's office with my head held high, maybe the first time I sang in church again and didn't care who was listening, I came back to myself. I stopped being just somebody's mother, somebody's bank, somebody's inconvenience. I became Dorothy again. Dorothy who grows roses on her balcony. Dorothy who sings in the church choir. Dorothy who reads Toni Morrison and drinks good coffee. Dorothy who knows her worth. And here's what I've learned. You can love someone with your whole heart and still choose yourself. You can forgive someone and still maintain boundaries. You can be a mother and still be a person with needs and dreams and a life of her own. Love isn't sacrifice that leaves you empty. Real love, the kind worth having, sees you, asks how you are, remembers your birthday, makes space for you at the table. And if the people in your life can't do that, then maybe it's time to do what I did. Choose yourself, not out of anger, not out of revenge, but out of the simple, radical belief that you deserve to be seen. I didn't get my old life back. I got something better. I got myself back. The coffee tastes right. The ocean sounds like music. The roses are blooming. And when I look in the mirror, I see Dorothy. Just Dorothy. And she is enough. She has always been enough. If you're watching this and you recognize yourself in my story, whether you're the one who disappeared or the one who let someone disappear, it's not too late. Love is not sacrifice that leaves you empty. Love is not service that makes you invisible. Love is not giving until you have nothing left, not even yourself. Real love sees you. Real love asks how you are. Real love remembers your birthday. And if the people in your life can't do that, then maybe it's time to choose yourself. I didn't get my old life back. I got something better. I got myself back. The house was just wood and bricks. What mattered was finding my way home to the person I'd lost, the woman who sang in church, who grew roses, who knew she deserved to take up space in the world. If this story meant something to you, I'd love to know what moment hit hardest. Was it the $8 coffee? The forgotten birthdays? The moment I walked out of that lawyer's office? Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you want more stories about finding yourself again after giving everything away, I'll be here. Until next time, remember, you are not what you give. You are not defined by your sacrifice. You are enough, exactly as you are. My name is Dorothy Williams. I'm 64 years old, and I finally know who I am.